Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And welcome to a meeting of the University of Wisconsin System Board of Regents. I would ask the Secretary to please call the roll.
Regent Bartell. Here. Regent Bradley.
Here.
Regent Burmaster. Regent Conley-Kiesler. Here. Regent Crane. Here. Regent Keene. Here. Regent Davis. Regent Drew. Here. Regent Falbo.
Here.
Regent Loftus. Regent Opgenorth. Regent Pruitt.
Here.
Regent Smith.
Here.
Regent Spector.
Here.
Regent Thomas. Here. Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh.
Here.
Regent Womack. Here. A quorum is present.
Good. Thank you very much. Good morning, and I would like to begin by introducing a new member of the Board of Regents, Aaron Wingad from UW-Eau Claire. Aaron is a junior at UW-Eau Claire. He is going to be succeeding outgoing Regent Colleen Thomas. I think that Aaron's appointment by the governor yesterday is the first time that a student regent has been from UW-Eau Claire. Aaron is a native of Eau Claire. He attended high school in Rice Lake. He's majoring in biochemistry and molecular biology, and because that doesn't take enough time, he's also minoring in Spanish. He intends to plan medical school after graduation. He has a long record of involvement in university governance issues, both in being involved in student organizations and also with serving as the director of academic affairs at UW-Eau Claire. He's also been involved in the Student Senate and the Pre-Med Career Exploration Program. Aaron's appointment will take effect the second that we adjourn the closed session meeting tomorrow. And I asked our secretary, Judy Temby, I said, how do you know when all this immense responsibility for higher education for one regent ceases and all of a sudden it becomes this immense responsibility for a new person? And she said, well, it's a process we call poisoning. Somehow it works. But Aaron, welcome. Glad you could join us. And I would also like to congratulate Regent Chuck Pruitt on his reappointment to the Board of Regents. Timely, I think. And now I would like to call upon President Riley.
Thank you, President Bradley, and good morning, everybody. Great to see you. Happy morning. Summer. I wanted to begin the meeting this morning on a very happy note by introducing two new colleagues who recently joined the UW family, and very recently, in fact, they both started their new positions just this past Monday. First, let me introduce to you, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Dean Van Galen, who's the new Chancellor at UW River Falls. Dean? Had up the mustache quota in the Chancellor Corps. Dean is a Wisconsin native and comes to us from the University of West Florida in Pensacola, where he was Vice President for Advancement. He's coming home in this job, not just to Wisconsin, but to the UW system. Dean earned his Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from UW-Whitewater, and UW-Whitewater also holds fond memories of Dean because that's where he met his wife, Mary, who was also born and raised in Wisconsin. He earned his Ph.D. in analytical chemistry from Kansas State University and did his postdoctoral research at the University of California, Berkeley. So welcome aboard, Dean. Glad to have you. I'm also pleased to introduce Dr. Thomas Harden, the new Chancellor at UW Green Bay, who's sitting right next to Dean. Tom? Also seeking refuge from the harsh southern climate. He comes to us from Clayton State University in suburban Atlanta, where he served as president since 2000. Under his tenure there, enrollment at Clayton State increased by 39%, and the university was ranked #1 in the South for campus diversity by U.S. News and World Report 6 out of the 7 past years. Tom earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Education from Miami University, his Master of Science from the University of Dayton, and his Doctor of Education from the University of Cincinnati. After years in the South, Tom and his wife, Kathy, will probably need to augment their wardrobes a bit. Just a tip, Tom, you can't go wrong with green and gold. Welcome to Wisconsin. With that, Mr. President, if you don't mind, I'll segue into the biennial budget.
Please do.
Discussion. When we last briefed you on the 2009-11 biennial state budget, we showed you what the governor had proposed. Late last week, the legislature's Joint Finance Committee, the JFC, completed its work on the budget, which now goes to the full legislature for approval. Senior Vice President Tom Andres will provide an overview of how the budget has evolved, and I'll try to provide a bit of context for that. So let me start by reminding you of the budget process leading to where we are now. Last August, this board advanced a recommended budget to Governor Doyle. Still in the early stages of an economic downturn, you approved a 2.5% pay plan recommendation for our faculty and academic staff. In February, with the economic indicators slipping further, Governor Doyle formally introduced his biennial budget proposal, which included a 5.2% reduction in GPR for the UW system. In March, with state revenue forecasts falling still further, the Joint Committee on Finance began its work on the governor's recommended budget. In the midst of their proceedings, in mid-May last month, the state announced that the difference between forecasted revenues and actual expenses for the coming biennium would grow by an additional $1.6 billion. As you can see, the UW system, along with all the state agencies, has faced major challenges from the outset of this process. Again, in the very first version of the biennial budget, it called for a 5.2% reduction in GPR support to the UW system, plus additional reallocations and lapses from other funding sources. As that process unfolded, state agencies that had originally faced some smaller cuts were asked to take on a bigger share of the financial burden. We worked hard to reinforce the message that the UW's original budget reduction had already posed serious challenges to our students and our campuses, and that further cuts beyond that threshold would be very damaging. I'm pleased to say that we succeeded in that regard. Governor Doyle did not recommend further base cuts to the UW, and legislators did not propose any. Even with no additional base budget reductions, the widening budget gap did produce new challenges for us. Based on Governor Doyle's recommendations, the Joint Committee on Finance added language to the budget bill giving him authority to furlough state and UW employees. The Joint Committee on Employment Relations also officially withdrew a scheduled 2% pay plan increase for non-represented faculty and staff. As you would expect, these compensation cutbacks are tough, very tough on the morale of our faculty and staff. We have been adamant in our support for competitive compensation for faculty and staff, having embraced a long-range plan to bring UW salaries up to compensation levels offered by peer universities. Those plans have been derailed by the financial crisis, but I know that we will advance that cause again as soon as we possibly can. As part of that same commitment to our faculty and staff, we've also been steadfast in our desire to offer full benefits to the domestic partners of UW system employees. And I'm pleased that the budget bill advanced by Governor Doyle and the Joint Committee on Finance does include that provision. The matter of state employee furloughs is very, very complex, to say the least. A number of us have been spending a lot of time, human resources professionals and lawyers, on this topic over the last several weeks. We do not control the basic furlough ground rules in the university. The state does that. Through daily communication with the Office of State Employment Relations, OSER, we've been arguing for flexibility to implement what amounts to a 3% pay reduction. Based on the guidance we've already received, we know that the number of furlough days will be commensurate with employees' full or part-time status, meaning faculty and staff on 9-month contracts would take a smaller number of furlough days. We also know that people with 50% appointments will continue to qualify for benefits because state law dictates that eligibility is based upon one's appointment, not on hours worked, and half-time employees will still retain their half-time appointments even with the 3% furloughs. There's much more that needs to be worked out on this issue at the state level and then within the university once we see what the big state guidelines are and how much flexibility we have within them, and we will certainly be talking with board leadership about all that in the weeks ahead. On a brighter note, the Joint Finance Committee advanced the UW Systems capital budget for 2009-11, funding high-priority academic buildings, residence halls, building repairs, and other projects. The capital budget now includes 36 major UW projects, and that's up from 34 in the budget that was advanced by the State Building Commission. And I think our Associate Provost in this area, or Associate Vice Chancellor in this area, David Miller, told me that this is the first time that there actually has been an increase in the number of our projects from what the State Building Commission recommended. Is that true, Bruce? Just walked in.
By the way, we know you're late now.
Timing was perfect. I was just telling people that I think you told me that this is the first time that the number of building projects approved by Joint Finance has gone up over what the Building Commission originally approved. Is that correct?
Certainly the first time in recent memory, or any memory of our longtime staff. Generally, there have been reductions at this point, and we're seeing about an $89 million increase over last biennial's capital budget, and the addition of the 2 projects was $72 million at finance, and they did not cut the all-agency fund, which has been the tradition.
That's good news all around. Thank you. So all of that, that will have a lasting impact on our ability to educate students and conduct world-class research in the University of Wisconsin. It will also boost the state's ability to compete in the knowledge economy. And in the short term, the construction projects alone are expected to create about 16,000 new jobs in Wisconsin. We continue to advocate for new flexibilities in the state-run building process, those flexibilities having been endorsed by this board, to make more efficient and effective use of public and private dollars, and we will continue to press that case. On Monday, I think most of you probably saw, I wrote to all 41,000 UW system employees about where we are in the budget process, and I concluded my message to them by saying this. Even as we recognize the national and international causes and effects of this punishing recession, I know that furloughs and rescinded pay increases are bitter pills to swallow. I have no easy words of wisdom to alleviate the anxiety and resentment that are natural human reactions in such situations. Nonetheless, we will get through this downturn and on to recovery. If we in the university can keep our energies focused on our vital work and our eyes on the horizon, we will speed the state's passage through these tough times and reposition it for a robust recovery. On the way to that recovery, we will need to manage our way through about $161 million in reductions and $94 million in givebacks, for a total of $255 million in lost funding. Our latest fact sheet, which is included in your packets this morning, shows the level of these cuts at each of our 15 institutions. Make no mistake about it, getting through the next several years will be very difficult. Here are some of the kinds of things that the international recession and our resulting budget cuts will force our students, faculty, and staff to deal with. For faculty, these cuts mean more students in their classes and less contact with each student. For students, these cuts mean fewer appointments with career counselors and longer lines at the registrar's office. These cuts will undoubtedly result in more vacant positions and higher workloads for faculty and staff who remain. For students, these cuts will mean fewer class choices and bigger class sizes, and for some, unfortunately, longer time required to complete their degrees. Faculty and staff will have fewer opportunities to keep current in their academic disciplines and strengthen their teaching and research skills. For students, these cuts mean fewer resources and opportunities for out-of-classroom learning experiences. We'll undoubtedly be seeing the consolidation and elimination of some degree programs over the next 2 years. And looking forward to our discussion about campus security later this morning. We won't be able to move as quickly as we'd all like to satisfy all the demands for more mental health counselors and emergency planners and police officers and related resources. But these remain high priorities, and we'll struggle. We'll struggle to protect the existing resources in these areas, from frontline personnel to administrative support for campus security. Granting that we'll have many tough choices ahead, there are other measures we still hope not to take. These are ones we hope not to take, such as double-digit tuition increase, one-size-fits-all enrollment caps, one-size-fits-all enrollment cuts, massive displacement of students from their degree programs, cancellation of teaching days, losing major competitive research dollars for lack of adequate grant writing staff and adequate time, thinning the faculty and instructional staff ranks to the point where the remaining overstretched classroom teachers cannot come close to meeting reasonable expectations of their students. And finally, another thing we hope certainly not to do is to abandon our first ever plan to hold harmless from any tuition increase students and families with need up to the median family income in Wisconsin. If the budget stays pretty much where it is now through the rest of the process, we will do everything we can to avoid those worst-case scenarios. We hope that when the Regents meet again on July 9th, the 2009-11 biennial budget will be put to bed, and we can recommend a reasonable single-digit tuition increase as part of your approval of the annual budget for the 2009-10 year at that meeting. Either way, we will have to set tuition then for the 2009-10 academic year. Between now and then, and the rest of the budget process should play out something like this. And I should add that in this section of remarks, I'm drawing heavily from Regent Loftus's bodice-ripping bestseller, How a Bill Becomes a Law.
It writes such a book. Don't you remember?
News outlets are reporting that the Assembly will take up the budget as early as next Wednesday, concluding its debate in 2 days or so. The Senate then takes up the bill where the Assembly left off. If there are differences between the two legislative houses, and there almost always are some differences, then a conference committee is formed to work out a compromise. The full houses vote once more on that compromise budget bill, which then goes on to the governor for signature and vetoes. So with that civics primer as our background, let me ask Senior Vice President Tom Andres to walk us through an overview of last week's Joint Finance Committee actions on our budget and how those numbers have shifted in recent weeks. Tom.
Good morning. I think Kevin has provided a lot of the substance of the JFC recommendations, including the impact on people and programs. The next biennium will be very challenging, not only in Wisconsin, but throughout the country. And we'll certainly keep a close eye on what's happening to everybody throughout the United States. What I want to do is offer some highlights of the JFC recommendations and focus on where there's an agreement with the governor's recommendations and major decisions and where there are notable differences. Very frankly, there are very few differences as we go through this, and I think that'll be pretty obvious. This is going to be a relatively high level of review. There's no intent in getting into a lot of detail, primarily because, quite frankly, there aren't many differences, and what we've discussed in the past in regards to the governor's budget hasn't changed a great deal. So we'll be able to use that as sort of the context.
Tom, just if I could ask for a second, could we get the PowerPoint on the center screen as well? Thanks, Cheryl. Here we go.
I think the first thing we'll be looking at today is the 2009-11 budget There's a number of pieces of this that actually will end up overlapping with the furlough and pay recommendations, so we'll have a separate section on that. And then also on the capital budget. Again, Kevin has highlighted that. David has said a little bit about it. There are some fairly significant changes to an already good capital budget. Implications of the capital, or implications of the operating budget. First of all, the JFC accepts the recommended $120 million reduction in GPR. Just to refresh your memory, $20 million is based on the 1% across-the-board reduction. $100 million was a general kind of targeted reduction across the system. And that becomes important because of the second issue. We're looking at splitting that general reduction of $100 million 50-50, meaning $50 million reduction in the first year, $50 million in the second year, with $15.5 million lapse. Now, why I bring that up is because the last time we were talking about this, we were looking at a split of 65-35. And the importance of that is that the lower number you've got in the second year of the biennium, that's the number that carries forward into the following biennium. So it's to your advantage to have as low a number as possible in the second year of the biennium. Under this, we're looking 50-50, but again, important with the lapse. Why are we shifting? First of all, this is in discussions with DOA as they're looking at their overall state budget and the implications of all of the funding there. Right now, we're splitting at 50-50 based on required funding in 2010 as per the higher education share of the fiscal stabilization fund. Now, this is something we had not anticipated, and I don't think the state did either, in terms of where we were relative to required expenditures from 2009 comparing to 2010. The bottom line was that at the $65 million reduction in the first year, we would have actually been below the minimum required as per the fiscal stabilization, the ARRA process. So what that then meant was, in terms of what DOA would do, is shift that $15 million in the first year to the second year. So we then moved toward the 50-50 split. Doesn't really have a major problem for us right now. I mean, as we look at this, because it's 50-50, it's the same amount of money we're talking about. The first year actually becomes a little bit easier because we're only dealing with 50. The second year, we're looking for more money, but the real key is that we're looking at the lapse of $15 million. And because of that, when you take the lapse out of the $50 million going forward into the next biennium, we're dealing once again with a $35 million impact going into the following biennium. And again, it works out very well for us. We'll also be looking at the rescinding of the June 2009 2% pay plan increase, and this also imposes furloughs on the employees. I'll look at both of those in a little more detail shortly. Also as part of this, the JFC accepted the governor's recommendations on the 1% across-the-board reduction for all fund sources, excluding, of course, tuition, federal trust, gift grant funds, and so forth. That generates about $17.6 million. So that's an additional amount that is part of the process. It also reduces the auxiliary funds, service balances, by $23.25 million. We had quite a lengthy discussion on this at the last meeting, and at that point, the governor was looking at $25 million. Right now, we're looking at a reduced figure in terms of funding coming out of those cash balances. As Kevin said, this also supports the tuition hold harmless initiative. So in terms of something that was critical from the beginning, it's carried right through to where we are now. And this also includes the recruitment retention funding, $15 million. It includes funding for the various research initiatives. There's the bioenergy initiative, the genomics initiative, Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery. It includes domestic partner benefits. It also includes the School for Freshwater Science and Public Health at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So what we see is generally moving forward in terms of the governor's recommendations. Okay, the major piece of this, or certainly one of the major pieces, is the Hold Harmless initiative. And again, the key that we're looking at here is you've got a student that is making $60,000 or less, or an annual family income, and they are qualified for need-based aid, will not have to pay a tuition increase. That concept continues. Now, the JFC actually reduced financial aid, assuming that the increase in Pell Grants will provide funding to support the Hold Harmless program. And that is true. When the governor made his recommendation, at that point in time, we did not know that there would be an increase in Pell Grants. And in the first year, we're looking at an increase of $600. JFC looked at this and said, well, can that not, in fact, be covering that Hold Harmless as it relates to tuition? And yes, it can. And I think as we look at it right now, the tuition will be in the range of $300 to $400 perhaps, as we're looking at it right now. So certainly in the first year, there is no problem with that. Also in financial aid, in terms of the WEG funding, the governor recommended that there would be no statutory maximum amount, meaning that right now, I think it's just under $3,000 is the maximum someone can receive out of WEG. He wanted to take that off so that HEAB would have the opportunity to provide higher levels of funding to those that were most needy. The JFC is looking at no increase in the maximum amount, much less taking it off, and then adding 6.1% or increasing it 6.1% in 2011. One of the downsides as we look at the governor's versus JFC recommendations is the reduced funding that will be available going into 2011-13. Now, a lot of things can happen. Obviously, there can be additional funds that are identified in the next process. But right now, the funding is built on one-shot dollars out of auxiliary services at the level of about $6 million. And so those are funds that as people are making commitments and talking about funding for financial aid, those are dollars that at least at the outset will not be there. So there will have to be actions taken to add those back and as it suggests, limiting funding available. And part of it is also looking at limiting the number of people that are available or that are eligible for the grants. It's another part of the discussion. Okay, let's get into the pay and furloughs. And again, as has been suggested, we don't have a lot of information or all of the information to provide to you right now on furloughs and how they're going to work, the mechanics and so forth. We do know that there's been the rescission of the 2% pay increase that was scheduled for June. There will be no increase in the pay plan as per the Joint Committee's action, Joint Committee on Employment Relations action recently. No increase in 2010 or 2011. And again, all employees will be taking furloughs up to 8 days annually for the biennium. And really, this speaks to what Kevin has already said. Everybody is not looking at taking an 8-day furlough annually. It's going to be prorated based on the hours that you work. And so somebody who's working 50% of the time will be looking at, I would imagine, for unpaid days of furlough. The system, again, as we've been talking about, I wish there was more information on this, is working closely with OSAR right now to try to implement a plan that acknowledges all of the issues that we all have, whether it's at the state level, whether it's within higher education, collective bargaining issues, policy. There's so many pieces that are coming together on this. But from everything I can see, there's a lot of progress that's being made right now. And finally, try to end on some positive news. Okay, that's the OSAR piece. Sorry. End on some positive news. Again, it's been raised a bit. As David said, there's been the addition of funding for both the Eau Claire building and Madison nursing. These were, again, above and beyond what the building commission had recommended. As we look at Eau Claire, $44.5 million added, $44 million out of the state funds. The importance for Eau Claire in particular is that it's the funding right now is, as they're moving through this and looking at project planning, the state has hired an architectural and engineering service for programming and pre-design, and that's kind of going on right now. So with a very specific awareness that there's going to be funding available, this is enumerated for this
coming biennium, but the funding will not be available until the following biennium. So there's a substantial amount of time to do that programming, pre-design, and design. So it works out really very well. Then the UW-Madison nursing facility, this will be enumerated in the upcoming biennium, $47.4 million cost, $28.1 million from state funds. Important to note here, and again, I think David also said this is funding that's being added on top of the statewide budget. This is not money that's being reallocated from some other project throughout the state or money that is coming out of the all-agency budget right now. And it's also important to note that this is a project that really was going to be a high priority in the following year. And as we look at it right now, that then frees up potential funding for other projects going into for enumeration in 2011 and 13. So overall, I think, again, a very strong capital budget. I think a lot of good things on the operating side, and a lot of things that, again, as we've said, are going to be very, very challenging. Any questions?
Regent Vasquez.
On the furlough, does that cover employees whose salaries are being paid through, say, federal grants, contracts, enterprise accounts? Then there may be no GPR dollars, or is there no distinction and everybody has to?
There are furloughs for everyone. What happens, however, is the dollars that are actually supporting on a federal grant in a number of different areas, those won't be lapsed. Those dollars will not be coming to the state. So, yes, everybody will be taking a furlough.
Regent Bartel.
What's the rationale?
I don't know the rationale behind that.
I've been asked that question by a number of people saying, you're a member of the Board of Regents, you must know this. I don't understand that. The money doesn't come back to the state, so...
I think my assumption has been, and again, maybe others can answer this better, but my assumption has been as a matter of equity. In some ways symbolic, I guess, but more of equity. I don't think there's a legal issue that relates to that, but that's the only thing that I think might be the case.
Again, I want to emphasize that this was not our choice. This is what the state told us we will do. So the rationale for it, we really need to ask people at the state level. One level, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. At another level, trying to administer a situation where you had some people on furloughs and some not, given the way our revenue streams work, would be a real nightmare administratively. We have people who are on both. We have people who are on state money sometimes in the year and federal money and other kinds of money at other times. We have people, obviously, lots of folks' salaries are supported through some tuition dollars. That's program revenue as well. It would just get very, very complicated to administer. But at the top level, does this make sense because the money will not go back to fill the state budget hole? No, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And I think one of the things that we can take away from this is the money isn't being taken away from the grants. It's not being taken away from, this is all tuition. Our tuition dollars are part of this. The dollars are not lapsing, so that means they are retained in those instances where people have put in funding. Well, they have to have put in funding as it relates to furloughs, and it also includes the 2% increase as well. So those dollars are at least staying there.
This would be my next question. Yeah.
Regent Falbo.
I have two questions. One, when you talk about the cutting out the salary increases, what are we hearing from other peer institutions and systems? Is it pretty much the same? What I'm trying to determine, are we falling further behind, or is everybody kind of in the same boat?
Well, I'll ask Chris to comment on it from his point of view. From what I've seen just with talking with peers around the country, we're not out of the general envelope of what's going on. There are certainly other states where university employees will be taking furloughs. There are other states whose budgets are in much worse shape that are proposing double-digit tuition increases, pay cuts, layoffs, cuts in enrollment. So those kinds of things are going on in some of the states that are in even worse shape than we are. But Al, any comment?
And then
Yeah, Mike.
What, our last budget process, or maybe it was even in between, we had a big unknown called veterans tuition remission. And I haven't heard anything about that and how it impacts us today. But it was all unfunded, and we knew it was going up. Where is that in all of this?
Well, right now, the JFC supported the governor's recommendation that the first call in terms of a veteran would be on the 9/11 funds at a federal level, and that there would be a hold harmless stipend that would be available to the individual to make up the difference if it was greater. The funding is, as of right now, our understanding the funding is available to do that.
On the state level for the difference? Or at just the federal level?
At the stipend?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be at the state level.
But I think, just to clarify, I think we're still facing part of covering that without funds. I mean, we're going to have to subsidize what we're going to get from the state and the federal government. Am I right?
I think there was some uncertainty about how much there.
In the governor's budget for 2007-09, there was, in the 08-09 year, about $6.5 million that's available for funding veterans munitions for both the University of Wisconsin system and the technical college system. That money is going to remain in the Higher Educational Aids Board, and that is the funding that will be used to cover the hold harmless stipends. Of course, that means that we will still be liable within the university system and the technical college system for any additional remissions beyond that. So it will need to be funded internally.
And how are we doing that?
In the 08-09 budget, you provided $18 million of tuition revenue to help cover unfunded remissions. So what's going to happen in the upcoming year is, with the requirement that they use federal benefits first, they will then use federal benefits, which will reduce the amount that is needed as an increase. And then you still have available the $18 million. You were hoping that was a one-time amount, but given the environment and given what has happened, there still is not state resources to cover that. So you will still be able to utilize those tuition dollars that you set aside for the remissions.
But what expense have we built into the budget to cover the shortfall? How much?
$18 million.
18 million?
Yes.
And that's a continuing amount of funds that we've used. It's part of the base, in fact.
Regent Davis.
Tom, I'd like to go back to the financial aid changes, and particularly the Joint Finance's decision to not go along with the governor's removal of the statutory maximum and the issue around limiting the number of eligible students. Can you elaborate in any way why they did that? Because it just is not quite making sense to me.
Well,
a matter of policy.
Yeah, I think there's two things here. First of all, as it relates to the initial decision to not support the governor in terms of there's two things going on here. There's the Wisconsin Higher Education Grant, where they said, where the governor put in about $25 million this upcoming biennium. They said, no, we're going to put in about $3.5 million. And those are dollars that will continue, but their assumption was, and it's to some degree pretty accurate, that the Pell Grant dollars, the increase in the Pell Grants, would make up for most of the difference that the governor was talking about. Now, on the second piece, in terms of where they're talking about the eligibility of students and the number of awards, that actually relates to the other component of financial aid, the tuition increase grant. And in that instance, the governor said, I'm going to put in $12 million, GPR. The Joint Finance Committee said, well, what we're going to do in the first year, we'll put in $12 million, but $6 million is auxiliary money. That's one shot. So that when we go into the following biennium on the tuition grant, we're automatically $6 million in the hole. So what they specifically said was, we will limit the amount of awards, and we will create a different set of guidelines so that fewer persons will be eligible for the grants.
To be able to afford that reduction?
Yes.
As opposed to some decision that the Higher Educational Aids Board can't manage that themselves. And see, 'cause the problem I'm having is with this notion that they can't decide to give larger grants based on need. I understand the fiscal part that you're describing, but I don't understand the policy part that gives them that authority to figure that out.
JFC?
Correct.
Well, I mean, I think they have the authority to...
No. I don't understand their decision
why?
regarding PF's authority.
I can only guess, again, and I'm assuming they may see that as an opportunity to have to increase the total allocations, that as you're giving more dollars to certain, to people who may be eligible for $5,000, $6,000, that happens, you then reduce the number of people that would be getting the grants. And my assumption is that they may be thinking that sort of opens the door to have to provide more funding to make sure they at least retain the level of awards. And again, that's a guess.
Thanks for the guess.
Yeah.
The whole harmless grant, the tuition increase grant is what they called it in joint finance, is actually in the University of Wisconsin system's budget, not in the higher educational aid. What they were looking at was they had increased the funding for the second year because they thought the costs were going to be higher in 2010-11 to $8.3 million. But $1.9 million of that is auxiliary funds. So $6.4 million GPR, $1.9 million of auxiliary funding, which is just one time. So trying to figure out how, going forward, they could contain that cost to only the GPR, that $6.4 million. They thought some ways of doing that would be limiting the number of people who could actually get the award. So what they're doing is saying that it's going to basically sort of phase out. In 2011-13, only people who were participating in and received the grants during 09-11 will be eligible for the grants going forward. So it's saying that this is a short-term program. It's going to continue to support the students who are in the program, but they will not add new students. And that doesn't prevent them from thinking of something new that they might want to do, or even deciding in future that they might look at something else. It's just recognizing the limited dollar amount and not wanting to increase the liability. Thank you.
Regent Walsh.
Tom, what is it? I understand we've got conference committee and a ways to go, but what is it your understanding is that who has yet to make decisions regarding the implementation of the furloughs and the 2%? And who still got to make a decision, or is it just in the governor's office, the implementation?
Yeah, I think OSER, working with the governor's office and working with actually higher ed and other state agencies to make sure they completely understand whatever decisions they make, what they will do. But I think it's primarily, I think it's in the governor's office and with OSER between them.
I have two questions then. Vis-a-vis and there's all sorts of what we call fairness issues or implementation issues, and I would remind all of us that, when you have this kind of budget problem, we're way past the fairness test. I mean, that isn't the litmus test for making decisions anymore. But where are we on the decision of the federal employee paid by all federal money? Is it just they're taking a furlough, that decision's been made?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, that's not subject. What is it that's still subject to some interpretation?
I think part of it is looking at issues related to flexibility and how different sectors could be doing a furlough, how it might relate to represented versus unrepresented. If there are differences, if there are issues related to collective bargaining, how do they connect to those that are not part of collective bargaining? I think it's trying to work through those pieces of information so that when there's decisions, we know what the impacts are.
Okay. I had understood in discussing it with the office vis-a-vis the hospital where I'm involved, where we have the very unique circumstance of having that part of our governance, which is called the board, has some state employees in it. It's just very unique, paid for by the hospital. So, that creates a really funny situation. But I had understood that the decision had been made that we were just going to have to, the collective bargaining issue is just a very simple issue. If you can't bargain it, we're going to have to find the money elsewhere. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and I'm kind of mixing all of the different pieces up together, and I don't know which may well be the one that's most influential. I know from our standpoint, in terms of discussions with OSER, We are just seeking as much flexibility that when they make a
Okay.
decision, that we have the opportunity, it's a payroll issue, it's a personnel issue, there's a variety of things, and they may be different from how the state approaches their, end game. So, again, I don't know, Al, if there's anything more that, in terms of your discussions with OSER, that...
Some of the issues relate to the Fair Labor Standards Act and what risks might be associated with different options and how you would implement the furlough. So there's different options that are being considered, and I know that...
But the overtime issues?
Correct, the overtime issues. I know that OSER and Pat and I have met with them and their attorneys, and they're also talking with the Department of Justice, or with our Attorney General's office, about what potential risks exist if we implement it this way versus that way. So that's what needs to be resolved before we really know how we can move forward. I think they've already resolved the union issues in terms of how the contract language is there, and that they can't be implemented that way. And there's management rights for others, non-represented employees, but it's just fairly for standard technical.
Chancellor Martin.
I just want to pick up on the point that Regent Walsh made and emphasize, please tell me if I've got this wrong, but given that there's no renegotiation of contracts, the 2% increase for represented employees will have to be covered by the campuses. I can't understand that as anything other than a base cut, an additional base cut to the campuses. The only other option would be layoffs, which in many cases won't be possible because of the kinds of work that's actually done by representative employees, quite apart from other reasons. So I just want to emphasize that. That in addition to possible problems with furloughs that could involve overtime. It's not clear that, I mean, it is clear that there's no state funding for any of those issues, and therefore I think we should see this as what it is, actually a base cut to the campuses if we end up being fully responsible for those amounts. So when we talk about the cuts we're getting, I think we need to add the amounts. For the Madison campus alone, just the 2% increase for represented employees will be millions of dollars. So.
That's a good point. We were instructed to prepare for layoffs in the represented ranks as a result of that. Now, where that's going to go, that's, I think, still one of the undetermined factors here. But nobody has come back to us that I know and said, don't prepare for layoffs in the represented ranks. Yeah, Regent Wells. Or Chancellor Wells.
I don't know if that's a promotion or not.
My compensation is going to go down 5%. I would not want to trade my compensation. It's just the issue about handling the layoffs to if the contracts aren't reopened, which apparently they may not be or will not be. We have to be especially careful that we're not connecting those two things. We have to do that strategically at the campus level, because I think you get into issues of retaliation. We made an agreement, collective bargaining agreement, then you can't say, well, because you didn't reopen the contract, then we're going to do X, Y, and Z to you. So what we're doing in our campus is we're saying we're going to do whatever we have to do strategically. We've got another cut coming, as Biddy is saying, then we just put that in all the rest of the cuts, and then it falls out as it falls out in terms of what positions are deleted or to the extent there are layoffs. So I'm just cautioning us. I think I'm right about that legally, that you've got to be careful about the retaliation.
I'll come back. Let me let Pat comment on this, Judy. Then Regent Crane.
I think the one thing it's fair to say is that there are a lot of legal issues involved in all of this planning, from the Fair Labor Standards Act to what we do with the 2% to everything else. So, and that is the purpose of our conversations with OSER and others at the state level, so that we take all of these things into account and do take proper care to minimize our legal risks with all of this.
That's why, if you remember, I said in my remarks this is very complex. I mean, it is. Regent Crane.
I think this is a question for you, Kevin, but this is just a general question about how, what kind of assistance is being given to the system and to the campuses in going through this time. I don't know exactly how to say anything more about that, but this has got to be turmoil all over. And how does the system assist campuses and others in the system to deal with the questions that are out there?
Well, I can say a word or two, and then folks from the campuses may want to talk a little bit about what they're doing. And again, this is still relatively new, where we know people have to take furloughs. We don't know exactly what flexibility we'll have to administer them. I know the chancellors have been very good about getting messages out to faculty and staff about here's what we believe we know at the moment, here's what we don't know yet. I've seen lots of emails back to chancellors, and I've gotten some of them about, well, you ought to consider doing it this way, that way, don't do it this way, don't do it that way, from employees. People have lots of good ideas they're sharing with us and concerns. I think presumably by July 1, this will have to be all figured out. We'll know the state framework, and we'll have some sense of what flexibility we have. We'll be able to get more definite information out to faculty and staff by then, I'm assuming. And then all of our campuses have employee assistance programs and offices, and I think we will be calling on those colleagues to be available for people for whom these kinds of hardships really come into play in major ways in their lives. And that's something we certainly would want to be able to do. But let me ask if any of the chancellors want to comment on any of the things on their campuses. Chancellor Gao.
I think it's very important to have good communication, and Kevin's message was helpful in that regard because so much is not known, and people are very uncomfortable, of course, when you have something this critical and you don't know the details. We had a meeting the other day with our classified staff, and that was something we haven't done before, but I wrote a message to the campus along the lines of what Vidya said. We've got more cuts coming. We really need to take this 2% issue seriously. And I had to be very careful not to make it seem as if we were saying, the unions need to do this or else. Nonetheless, whenever you talk about these issues, people are sensitive. And so what I heard back is we'd like to meet. So we had a meeting. We got about a third of our classified staff in. It was an overflow situation. It was really unprecedented. And what they were saying is on the furloughs, and I think it's what we feel, hopefully we can get the flexibility in higher education to do this in a way that makes sense for us and is sensitive to a lot of the issues that you've been talking about. One gets the feeling, as you watch this, that really the legislators were looking at the budget problem and said, okay, we can get this much on these furloughs, we can get this much on another 2%, but I don't think anybody really, until now, and these are the conversations that are being held, it sounds like daily, thought about what are the ramifications. The thing we also haven't talked about, from an HR standpoint, to track the furloughs is actually quite complex, and there will be costs there, too, that haven't been talked about. But the communication on a regular basis is very important. I think we've been getting great things from UW system and staff as you discover them here in Madison, and then we turn around and send those out to our people. But there's no denying, I'm sure everybody would agree, this is an unprecedented time, and there is a great deal of uncertainty and tension. And one of the big ones is the academic staff contracts, people who are on yearly contracts. We haven't been able to renew those yet because we haven't heard some of these details, and that we're past the normal point, and so people start to say, well, I haven't got my contract yet. What does that mean? And so, again, we've been trying to say, we've got another $450,000 in budget cutting to do. We're going to try to do it through vacancies, but if you press me and say, can we avoid job loss? not sure about that. And again, that's not a very comfortable thing. So hopefully these details will get worked out soon. And I just would underscore what Chancellor Martin said and Chancellor Wells. We've got more cutting that we're going to have to do. In talking to our represented people, they are not at all eager to reopen contract negotiations for a whole host of reasons. And I suspect, and I don't want to put words in the governor's mouth, but that he was saying either that happens or there'll be layoffs, but I don't know that there is this direct linkage there, and I think that would be a little bit awkward to say, okay, now you have to target certain people in your budget cutting. Hopefully, again, we can do it without job loss, but I'll tell you, I know I speak for all my colleagues, we're at a point right now where all the ideas we had are pretty well used up, and you start getting down to some pretty unpalatable things. So that's where it's at on our campus.
Thanks, Joe. Chancellor Santiago.
I won't repeat what my colleagues have said, but the communication part is absolutely important. Our ability to reinforce the system's message and their ability to reinforce our message is important. I would also add that one of the things we've done is allowed as much flexibility down to the schools or the colleges as we can, so they determine how best to take the cuts, because this is not a cookie-cutter approach. A lot of the colleges are very different. Some of them are taking them by not renewing contracts. Others are deciding to do different sorts of things. For us, part of the challenge is if you look at the budget, you see, for example, 2 new schools. And our faculty are saying, well, how can you do 2 new schools when you're cutting, when you have a $20 million budget cut? And I have to remind them that the 2 new schools are not funded. So there is no funding implication of the 2 new schools. It's authorization, which is entirely different. But we are in a difficult time on our campus because there is the belief of growth, that growth is occurring and we're acquiring land and doing a lot of things privately, while at the same time we're kind of hunkering down. So that mismatch is playing out. But I think flexibility at the lower divisional levels is hugely important for us.
Thanks, Carlos. Chancellor Gal mentioned the difficulty of tracking, or you're thinking about the difficulty of tracking when furlough days will get taken, and that goes to our increasingly rickety human resources system, which we've been trying to repair, and we're still working at it. Tom Andres will have a few things to say about that at Business, Finance, and Audit this afternoon. But one of the, I think, unanticipated side effects of this kind of action that needs to be taken, and there are lots of them, is depending on what flexibility we have and what choices we make in implementing furloughs, with all of the manual entering that some of those options may require, are we going to be able to do it given the rickety old human resources system that we currently have? That's one of the things that keeps me up at night, among many of the others that you've heard from the chancellors. Regent Loftus.
Kevin, you said in your remarks something like of the things we would not do would be cookie-cutter enrollment caps or cuts. Does that mean you would entertain selective enrollment caps and cuts?
Well, I think what we've said all along, Tom, is we want to keep as much of the growth agenda momentum going forward, kind of along the lines as Carlos was saying, as we're having to hunker down due to these cuts. Even before the cuts became as traumatic as they are, some campuses were intending to grow and others were not in terms of absolute numbers. Some were working to graduate more of the current students they have, for instance, rather than admitting additional numbers of students. So again, we're in the process of talking with the chancellors about this. I think our commitment is to make an effort to keep our doors open to the greatest extent possible under the current circumstances, because we know how far we have to go as a state to get even to the national average of people with college degrees in this state. And we know how vital that is for Wisconsin's ability to come out of this recession in at least the same position it was going in, and hopefully a little farther ahead. So, we are not like the Cal State system announcing we're going to cut 10,000 students or whatever our equivalent of that would be out of our system. They have announced that. At the same time, I want to give the chancellors, as they look individually at what's going on in their campuses and how these cuts will play out, the ability to come to me and to you and say, well, do we need to do something here that we haven't done before? Can we take as many students in as we have? So far, no one of them has come and said that's what I think I'll need to do, but I don't want to close the door on this now, knowing the size the numbers have gotten to and knowing that there's some more of the process, back to the bill becomes a law, there's some more of the process that has to play out before we're sure what the cuts will be. Yes, Chancellor Martin.
Forgive me for speaking again so soon. Sure. Since you asked about impacts on the campus, I just feel compelled to say something on behalf of the faculty at Madison. We're concerned, of course, about the research enterprise. And to go back to Regent Bartel's earlier point, the notion that federal funds and salaries on federal funds will be cut as a result of furloughs and the rescinding of the 2%, as well as state funds. What the researchers are pointing out is not only that that doesn't really help the state financially, but potentially hurts the state by virtue of the fact that there are smaller salaries, fewer tax dollars going to the state, less research being conducted, and possibly fewer people in the lab. One researcher showed that it would mean in his lab 100 hours fewer of actual work in the lab over the 2-year period, and talked about competitiveness issues with researchers in the same field on other campuses. What a couple of the researchers suggested, and I know that this decision has probably been made for good, but I want to bring it up. The researchers suggested that federal funds not be cut since it won't help the state financially, but that those who actually were to receive a better deal by virtue of being on federal funds, offer up parts of their own funding for a fund to protect those who will be cut. And that seems to me to be the kind of equity that helps everybody, at least a little, instead of the kind of equity that hurts everyone equally. And as I say, I think that my remarks will not have an impact, but I do want to say them on behalf of the campus, that there are ideas out there about how people could help one another a little by virtue of dealing differently with non-state funds, which are maybe a different articulation of what equity means, but I think a lot of them.
Thanks, Biddy. Any other questions or comments on this topic? All right, hearing none, we will keep working at this between now and July 9th, which will be the next meeting of the board. I'm sure there will be new news on these budget fronts then, and we'll certainly be looking at the annual budget for 9-10 at that meeting and making some decisions in this larger context on that. So thank you for your questions and advice, and thank the chancellors who contributed as well. President, do you want me to move into the accountability report?
Yes, I do. Please.
And I want to thank Tom Andres and Frida and Debbie and the whole staff and on the finance side for helping to make sense of this. I want to thank Al and his folks in Human Resources for working with OSER and others to try to make sense of it. A lot of hard and good work has gone on by those folks and their colleagues over the last number of weeks. I'm happy this morning to present to you the newest accountability report for the UW system. If we're trying to put the impact of the proposed budget into perspective, this document, this compilation and interpretation of data is a good place to start in many ways. To understand, for example, why the cuts facing the university, which we've just been discussing, are so difficult to handle, look at the data, look at the numbers, look at the efficiencies we already have in place. Consider that our administrative spending or institutional support per student is already well below the national average for four-year colleges and universities. Consider the progress we've made in making our students' path to graduation more efficient by reducing the average number of credits taken to earn a bachelor's degree, which translates into lower tuition costs for students and families and more production efficiency for the university. I think these kinds of markers provide valuable perspective in the environment that we find ourselves in. The report that you have in front of you today, I should mention, is not merely an update of last year's report, but it represents a new direction. As many of you know, UW System's journey in accountability reporting began more than 15 years ago. We were the first statewide system of higher education to publish an annual accountability report, focused on consistent measures of access, degree completion, professional preparation, and stewardship of resources. Though each year's report has included updates and improvements, this year marks only the second major revision of the annual report format in those 15-plus years. So the report before you today has a new organization and an expanded emphasis, reflecting the UW system's strategic framework and the goals of our growth agenda for Wisconsin. The new title, Investing in Wisconsin's Future, conveys how our strategic priorities are aimed to benefit the people of Wisconsin. I believe that the basic tenets of the growth agenda have taken hold and that people appreciate our clear-cut framework and goals. Building on that broad awareness and understanding, the new report allows them to see how we're making progress toward the goals they support. From cover to cover, you'll find this year's report has a new design and layout that's easier to navigate, including a wealth of additional related information. In its online electronic form, and there is one, those links are direct, allowing readers to click on a link and jump directly to a related in-depth report or website. Though the organization and appearance of the report are new, we have not abandoned what made the previous report strong. This year's report continues to focus on a manageable number of accountability indicators, each of which captures a key aspect of UW System's performance. Each indicator has a measurable goal, typically stated in terms of a national benchmark or a numerical target, and our progress on each goal is clearly shown. You'll note that the performance measures we're tracking go far beyond the traditional widely used indicators, measures like access, enrollments, retention, graduation, and resource management. These are very important core data, yes, but we also want to take into account and measure UW System's impact on Wisconsin communities through civic participation, through community outreach and engagement, and as an engine driving the state's economy. The information about economic impact makes the point that in a severe recession, the UW is one of the few sure bets to help revitalize the economy and set it on a positive course for the long term. At a time when demonstrated value per dollar invested is so important, the cost efficiency data are equally compelling. In the report, you'll see that it's estimated that the 2007-8 graduating class will make an annual contribution of $507 million to Wisconsin earnings, a $9 million increase from the previous year. The UW System's 2007-8 budget of $4.5 billion, that's our total annual budget in 07-08, generates a $10 billion annual contribution to Wisconsin's economy. That's a return of 10 times the $1 billion annual state investment in the UW system. So again, although our annual budget, operating budget runs at about $4.5 billion a year, the state puts in about $1 billion of that, and the state gets a $10 billion annual contribution to the state's economy in return. Our faculty and staff are engaged in work that's critical to the future of our state and all of its citizens, and we want to communicate clearly about our progress in that work. So for more on how the report does that, let me turn the floor over to Interim Associate Vice President Sharon Wilhelm. Sharon.
Thank you, and good morning. As President Riley mentioned, the UW system has a long history of accountability reporting. The first report was published in 1994 and served the UW system until 2001, at which time it went through a major revision. This led to the second phase of accountability reporting entitled Achieving Excellence and emphasized the UW system's service to students. This past year's efforts has resulted in a third phase of accountability reporting in the UW system. While the primary objective was to align the report with the 7 core strategies of our strategic framework, we also took the opportunity to examine the strengths and weaknesses of the past report. For example, one strength was the manageable number of indicators. However, we felt there was room for improvement in making the navigation of the report easier. So before I summarize our progress on our accountability goals, I'd like to orient you to the report's new layout. The report now has 7 sections, one for each of the core strategies of the strategic framework: prepare students, more graduates, well-paying jobs, stronger communities, resources, operational excellence, and collaborations. 20 accountability indicators are spread among these 7 strategies. For each indicator, a chart or table provides a quick reference to data illustrating progress to the accountability goal. And bulleted text provides brief background on the indicator and interpretation of the data. Accompanying each indicator is a More to Explore box with related information on either the context within which the UW system operates, additional data of interest, or examples of ways the UW system strives to achieve the progress. Many of the More to Explore items reference related publications. On the web version of the accountability report, these links are live and enable the reader with just one click to quickly explore an issue in much greater depth. Aligning our accountability report with the UW system strategic framework resulted in an expansion of the report's emphasis and 5 new accountability indicators. They are: a new degrees conferred indicator appears under the core strategy of more graduates. Degrees are also a focus under the core strategy of well-paying jobs, with the new indicator, degrees in high need and leading edge fields. UW degrees conferred in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM fields, and health professions reflect the UW system's efforts to provide qualified graduates for the types of jobs that are projected to experience above average growth in Wisconsin. Another new indicator is community outreach and engagement under the strategy of stronger communities. It seeks to measure the impact of the UW system outreach programs and related activities on Wisconsin communities. Under the strategy of balancing, diversifying, and growing university resources, the UW system's revenue has been added as an indicator. Lastly, a new indicator of Wisconsin partnerships is under development to help measure progress on our strategy of increasing collaborations. A system-wide task force has begun to look at ways to more systematically define and collect data on Wisconsin's partnerships for future editions of Investing in Wisconsin's Future. In addition to the new accountability indicators, this year's report includes more detail by race, ethnicity, gender, and low-income status on many of the indicators. At the front of the report, on Roman numeral pages 3 through 5, is a status grid summarizing the 7 core strategies, the 20 associated indicators, and UW system's progress on each of those indicators. Progress is marked with one of the following: a plus sign indicating the goal for the accountability indicator was achieved, a minus sign to indicate we did not achieve the goal of the indicator, or a combination of a plus and a minus indicating mixed results. That is, portions of the overall goal measured by the indicator were realized, but some were not. The status grid indicates that the UW system met its goal on 10 indicators, had mixed results on 7, and has yet to achieve its goal on 2 indicators. In addition, the new indicator, Wisconsin Partnerships, is listed as incomplete until the task force completes its work. Therefore, of the 20 total indicators, the UW system met or partially met 17 of them. And there is much good news. The UW system continues to provide educational experiences that prepare students for future careers and for civic participation both in our communities and in our global society. Overall, the UW system does well on its goals related to producing more graduates. It continues to provide access to 33% of Wisconsin's high school graduates. Retention and graduation rates are above national averages, and both enrollments and degrees conferred have increased. The UW system has increased the amount of external research funding, which not only leads to the development of new technologies and industries, but also creates well-paying jobs in Wisconsin. The UW system continues its operational excellence with administrative costs well below national and state averages. From a student perspective, the average credits taken on the way to a bachelor's degree remains at low levels, providing savings for students in time and tuition. Despite these achievements, some challenges remain. While there has been progress overall on the goals related to producing more graduates, the rates of access, retention, and graduation for most students of color remain below those of white students, even though enrollments of students of color have increased in both absolute and percentage terms. In terms of resources, the UW system's total revenue increased 3% from the previous fiscal year, below the target, an average annual increase over the last decade of 5%. Revenues from gifts, grants, and contracts, which account for over 1/4 of total revenues, increased only 1%. Now, I'd like to turn your attention to the institutional accountability reports provided in your materials. As in the past, these reports supplement the system-wide report. In addition to 4 common measures, each institution provides additional measures that reflect its specific mission and strategic plans. Over the next few months, we plan to undertake a revision of the institutional reports to better align them with the strategic framework and enhance their usefulness as an internal management tool. The last item I'd like to bring to your attention is the UW system's continued participation in the national initiative to increase accountability of public institutions of higher ed, the Voluntary System of Accountability, or VSA. Last fall, at your October board meeting, you received a walkthrough of UW-Stevens Point VSA College Portrait website. As part of the UW system's participation, all 4-year UW campuses now provide consistent and comparable information on the characteristics of each institution and its students on their web-based VSA College Portrait. In addition to UW campuses adopting this accountability tool on each of their own websites, a national website lists the VSA participants as well. This initiative is just one more way in which the UW system demonstrates its commitment to being accountable to students, their families, and all stakeholders. So, in summary, I hope you are pleased with the work accomplished so far, but work continues on the refinement of our accountability. Work groups will be meeting and discussions will be taking place over the next several months to further enhance or fine-tune the goals and metrics of these reports. Your comments and observations made today will also guide our work. This concludes my remarks. President Riley?
Thank you much, Sharon. Thanks to you and your staff for really great work in redesigning this report and hooking it directly to the goals of the growth agenda and the objectives of the strategic plan. I think it does that very well now.
Thank you. It's a collaboration between a very creative work group and an amazing staff.
Thanks. Stand open for questions or comments from board members. Regent Davis.
I want to join you, Kevin, in commending the fabulous work this does to sort of align all of the strategies, and particularly of the growth agenda. I think it did a fabulous job of that. And in that regard, I know it's a work in progress, as you have described, and I've had some conversations with Rebecca Martin about this, and I look forward to the continued evolution, but I want to make a couple of points in terms of what I would like to see that evolution cover. One is that I would like, I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but I believe I got this maybe a week ago, and this is tremendous information. I haven't had enough time to even digest it, read it all, think about it, analyze it, so I'm not coming today prepared to ask a whole bunch of meaty questions, and I believe that we ought to have that opportunity. So I would like to see the accountability report and all the campus reports as an agenda item brought back in some way, form, or fashion sometime in the future. And maybe it's such a shame on me, but it's not like I don't have a day job. And so this is really tremendously important. And I just would like the opportunity, another opportunity at some time in the future. And I think we have a new student region who probably hasn't seen it at all, and so I would like to make that request. Secondly, I there's a lot of pages here, a lot of information, but what's not here is, in my view, is the analysis of the why so that we can inform the what it will take to move the needle on issues around graduation, retention of students of color. And I think some of that is going to be informed through a lot of some of our other initiatives, like the equity scorecard, for example. I think it presents information, but it doesn't say, well, why is that? So that we can then say, well, what can we do about it? So I'm just thinking at some point, further evolution might be to contain some sort of analysis that takes into consideration those other bits of information that can inform what we need to do to get better results. So
Thank you. Thank you for both of those. And on the second one, Sharon may want to jump in on this too. One of the things we struggle a lot with is how big to make this book.
I know. That's why I said there's a lot of pages.
You get pressure on both. More needs to be in here, less needs to be in here.
Yeah,
we do, though, now have the ability with the electronic backdrop of this to do a lot more than we used to be able to do connected directly to it. And I think, like a lot of other entities that put out publications, we're struggling to figure out how to use the print and the electronic stuff together. But Sharon, I don't know if you want to...
Sure. I just had two thoughts occurred to me. One is just what President Riley mentioned. What we're hoping is in those links that I mentioned, that you can go into more depth on any issue, that we have enough of those documents that really explore the issue much fuller than what this one document would. So we're hoping that if there's other areas that we need to create what we call informational memorandums or some kind of publication that we can link to that would get into the whys and really drill into the issue in a fuller way, we need to develop them so that we can link to them. And then the second thought I had too was that in the revision, I appreciate your comment, because as we begin work on the institutional accountability reports and making them a more useful internal management tool, we need to keep that in mind of exploring some of these issues that are unique to an individual campus. So.
Well, let's have Senior Vice President Martin, then Regent Vasquez, then Regent Crane, then Regent Smith.
I wanted to go back to Danae's first point about bringing this back for future discussion and suggest, if I may, that there's a wealth of information here that really does, I think, beg the discussion issue. It seems to me that there are pieces that could be picked up by various committees where we would have more time to really delve in depth into some of the issues that would be of particular interest to our various committees. And I think nothing would make Sharon and me more happy after all the work we've done on this to have piqued your interest enough to really want to get further into the data and what stands behind it. So that's just one thought of how we might do that moving forward.
Good thought. Thank you. Regent Vasquez.
I concur with everything that's said about the wealth of information. One thing that I would just say, in terms of what we're actually receiving as far as our packet of information, on a personal basis, I think that I'm very satisfied with what we've actually gotten. In light of the fact of the website, that if I need much more in-depth information, I can go there. What I also appreciate about that is that it's there, so, and I'm one that I'm awake at midnight many times. If I want to go at midnight or I want to go at 7 o'clock in the morning, that's my prerogative. And that's one thing that's great to be able to do that. On the following up on the comment about the committees, and I think that's an excellent idea. The one thing that I would appreciate, though, is I think there may be some topics that the entire board needs to be engaged in. And that while I do think it's important for the committees to delve into some of these in much more detail, there probably are some topics that as an entire body we should be engaged in the discussion, and hopefully in our role of providing at least some guidance to the system. So I would encourage that, whether it be through the committees or from Kevin, your office, that you may bring to our attention and saying, you know, of all of these, there are some here that need to be further discussed in detail. And I think we're already doing that. I thank President Bradley for scheduling those days for us to come as a board to just simply discuss issue topics that we're not necessarily going to be engaged in decision-making. So I think that may be a way to be able to not lose the tremendous amount of information that's here and also not get lost in it by having that opportunity to focus on some specific topics that we really need to address.
Thank you, Jose. Regent Crane.
I thought the presentation of this booklet was it's very accessible information, and I know that I'll be using it a lot, and I really find it very high quality. I'd like to make 3 comments on what's in it, and some of it reflects prior conversations, but and some oxes that I gore periodically. But one is that when we talk about preparing people for high-paying jobs, I wish we would include some additional words with that, into high-paying, satisfying, and jobs that contribute to the community and to the society. I just think that we've got to stop pressing the fact that this is all about high-paying jobs, or that those things need to be said together. And this isn't, we do this all the time in the way we talk about these issues, and I'd like to change the terminology or expand it. We've talked before about the race and ethnicity statistics and the importance as we move ahead of trying to get the low income connected to that, because I think that that's a critical understanding of how those things interact and where they do and where they don't in order to understand where we need to go. And then while I understand the importance of reducing the credits for the credit load, I don't want us to say that all education means fewer credits, or that we succeed only by reducing the credit load. I know why we're trying to do that in a broad sense, but there are. We heard our new regent introduced this morning about what he is including in his coursework, and I think that part of education is getting as much education as you can within the opportunity. So.
Thank you. Those are all excellent points, Judy. And on the last one, just something to say that may dampen some of your, or may cut out some of your worry about it. I think, when what we've done is gotten down to is about 145 degrees on average, 135?
133.
133. So if you think about the usual bachelor's degree program at 120 required credits, we're not cutting huge swatches of the educational experience out. And I think the way we've done it, working with departments throughout the system, has been to work with people at the ground level on what might not be as necessary as some other things.
Yes, my point is not that is not questioning what we have accomplished, but it's why we're doing this and what we're saying about the broader educational experience.
Regent Smith.
Thank you. I don't know if you mentioned, Kevin, but I would suggest, if it hasn't been, that all our legislators can get a copy of this. That would be good to get it in there.
I was going to talk a little bit about its distribution.
Okay, I certainly suggest that. And in that regard, just one point, in that one issue that, since I've been around, the legislators have been interested in, goes to 7 collaboration, and particularly you talked about collaborative degree programs, but also the transfer of credits between the two systems has been one that is always on legislators' minds when I've met with them. And we just spent about an hour at our last technical college board meeting talking about the transfer of credits from both ways, our system to the technical college and the technical college back to our system. And I would suggest perhaps something in here that would indicate that goal as part of the collaboration. There's been a lot of statistics we got at our meeting showed a lot of progress on that issue, and I think that would be of interest to not only legislators but the general public.
Good point. All right. Anybody else want to raise an issue? Regent Bradley.
Well, I would just comment that we do talk about what we can do for Wisconsin's economy with the well-paying jobs. And that comes often in the discussion of the growth agenda, increasing the number of baccalaureate degree holders, attracting more from out of state, and then helping the state do what we can by increasing the jobs that will employ them both. But I would point out, we can't cover everything all the time. We're trying to get people focused on the specifics of the growth agenda. But our core strategy number one, I would point out here, has nothing to do with what people make in their pay in getting jobs upon graduation. Our core strategy number one is our LEAP initiative. And it is all about graduating people with the critical thinking skills and people who can contribute to their communities, whether they're making a small salary, a medium salary, or a high salary.
Thank you, Martin.
Regent Davis.
Just to maybe clarify, in thinking of your response to my first point and Sharon's, maybe, because I understand you can go on the website, you can drill down, and I think that's a good thing, and links, and some people do that more than others, and what have you. I guess what I'm really asking us to think about is whether we can figure out a way to do some kind of analysis of the why around issues that are persistent. Maybe that's limiting it to issues that are persistent, like graduation and retention of students of color, like hiring and promotion or whatever of faculty of color, like let's fill in the blank. Because I just think that at some point to have it be part of the primary document would allow for a better, more qualitative way of being accountable for progress. So I just want to put that out there, maybe limit what I'm talking about, because I'm very mindful of the number of pages and all of that kind of stuff. But I think there's some issues in here that have been issues since I got on this board in 2003, and probably before, that we probably want to do some sort of analysis to feed into what we're going to do about it. So
I know you know this from some other work you've been doing with us. The individual campus reports on those and other issues are discussed by me and the chancellors every year and regularly, but every year in the performance evaluation. And there we have a chance to drill down about, what's the situation on this particular campus when we look at this piece of data versus what's the reason for this, the why on another campus. And those conversations are appropriate and useful because the situations are different sometimes from one campus to the next. Yes, Sharon.
Yes, and President Riley, I'd like to just add one thing. One of the new pieces to the institutional accountability reports this year is that we asked each institution who participated in the equity scorecard to reflect something of that investigation, of that analysis in their institution report. And as we have a second set involved in those activities, I think we'll be able to even expect to see more in the institutional accountability reports.
Regent Pruitt.
I just wanted to make one comment related both to this, but also link it in a little bit to our earlier conversation about the budget and the challenges of access for Wisconsin students, and especially the challenges of access to students of color. I do think amongst the few slivers of sunshine in this budget that has emerged is the provision that provides in-state tuition for children of immigrants who have graduated from our high schools and have lived in our state for 3 years. And I think that has the potential, not only, in my humble opinion, the right thing to do, but it also has the potential to have a pretty significant effect on our efforts to increase both the number and percentage of students of color, and also to expand access to our system to those who have been less well served over the last few years. So I really appreciate both the challenges you outlined here, but I also think we got to look for sunshine where we can find it. And that's at least in my judgment a ray.
Thank you for that. All right, thank you. Oh, yes. Chancellor Wells. Yep.
In
this has to do with comments around workforce and community development and the LEAP initiative, and tying it back to the accountability report. Obviously, what we're all trying to do is more and better prepare graduates. The notion that we want more talented, liberally educated, technologically skilled, global citizens. Right? And one of our challenges is to make sure, broadly in this state and in the country, but I think particularly in this state, that we're every part of workforce development and community development, every much as part of that as the technical colleges are. And we still have that issue. We're still not thought of as being fundamental for workforce development. It's a frustration that we have to, I think, have to deal with. But if you back up in terms of the LEAP initiative and the essential learning outcomes, then there's a whole set of high-impact educational practices that we know will lead to more of the essential learning outcomes, that will get more of those better prepared graduates that we're focused on. So in our report, we cover one of them. That has to do with the number of students that are having international experiences. But there's a whole lot of others we don't cover. The number of students that are having service learning experience, the numbers of students that are in collaborative learning, the number of students that are doing undergraduate research. So these are some things that I think we need to talk more about, because that, back to the budget, those are the things that get hammered most in the budget. The high-quality, high-impact educational experiences and practices for our students, because they're the most labor-intensive, and they require a whole campus community to deliver those. And tomorrow you're going to hear about the War Through Our Eyes project. You just keep that in mind, because that's a great example of a high-impact educational experience for our students. It's very labor-intensive.
Well, you're very timely, Chancellor Wells, because at the July meeting of the board, we will, as I said earlier, take up the 09-10 annual budget discussion, but the other half of that one-day meeting we've decided will be on the university's roles, and there are more than one in workforce development. So we'll have a chance to dive into that one. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you much. We are going to share this widely with the legislature, with the governor. We're going to share it, too, with some of the statewide groups that need to know about our accomplishments and challenges, groups that can be helpful to us if they do know. I mean, regional economic development entities around the state, chambers of commerce, the Higher Ed Business Roundtable, WMC and the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, Competitive Wisconsin. If you have further suggestions for groups or individuals to share it with, I'd love to have them. Send the report to your sister in Peoria and see how it plays there. And, we want everybody in Wisconsin to know that by this report that we're transparent, we're accountable, we have a strategic plan to which we link our performance measures, and that we're in the business of continuous improvement. So if we can use this report to keep sending those messages, it will have a very positive effect for us and for the whole state, I think. Well, I think we can probably move now into the discussion of the safety report. We will this morning get an update on the UW system safety activity. For those of you who might be wondering, this has nothing to do with the ever-changing adventure of road and building construction in this city and on this campus. It's nice to see that everybody got here, and for those of you who came late, you have a pass because of that. By almost every measure, we should start these discussions of campus safety and security by saying, I think, that campuses are relatively safe places. That is, the research tells us that incidents of violence on college campuses are less frequent than in the wider society. Our own crime statistics in the UW system generally reflect those national trends. That's good news, but it's certainly not something we can ever take for granted. So it really behooves us to make our operating code to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So a little history here. After the Virginia Tech tragedy in early 2007, UW system, along with lots of our peer institutions across the country, took a hard look at the measures and practices we have in place to keep our campuses and the people on them safe. I appointed the President's Commission on University Security, and UW Madison Police Chief Sue Reisling, who later agreed to chair that group. Around that same time, Governor Doyle established a task force on campus safety. Both groups were generally charged with identifying ways in which campuses could prevent, intervene, respond, heal, and resume operations if confronted with the threat or actual incidents of major violence on campus. The reports from both of these groups then form the basis of the UW System's report on campus safety, which was presented to this board last June, so just a year ago. That report provided an ongoing, or an overview of ongoing safety efforts up to that point. It also described how UW institutions were responding to the new recommendations and best practices that were emerging from the work of those two committees, the governor and the university commission. So now it's time for an update a year later as we continue to work toward creating and ensuring a safe and productive environment for the UW community. I want to emphasize that this is an issue in which we can never let our attention flag. We need to grease the wheel before anything squeaks, to mix metaphors here. As you're about to hear, I think our campuses have been working very hard in this regard, and in that spirit. Given our current economic climate, it's a tough challenge, but this is something that we cannot and will not let slide. My colleague, Associate Vice President Larry Rubin, is here with us with other colleagues to show you today how we're keeping the spotlight on campus security across the UW system. So Larry, the floor is yours.
Good morning. In addition to providing an overview of the safety and security efforts at our institutions, the UW report on campus safety, which, as you said, we presented to you last June, included a set of system-wide and campus expectations that were based upon those recommendations contained within those commission studies. And you asked us to return in a year to report on the progress that had been made in addressing those expectations. And that is going to be the focus of our presentation today. Julie Gordon, first Director of the UW System Office of Operations Review and Audit, will begin by summarizing the results of the questionnaire that we sent to the campuses, asking them to indicate how they have addressed each of the expectations. And then following Julie, we will have representatives from two of our campuses describe the progress that their institutions have made and the challenges that they have encountered in addressing this big task. First up will be Petra Roeder, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at UW Oshkosh, and then Sue Reisling, Chief of Police at UW Madison. And then Sue will also be presenting a short training video that her office produced on dealing with an active shooter situation, a video that is being shared and used by a number of our institutions. And then I will come back up and talk about how we are addressing the system-wide expectations that were contained in the report. And then at the end, we'll open things up for any questions or comments that you might have. So, Julie?
While Julie comes forward, just let me remind everybody that Regent Jeff Bartell was the Regent liaison to the commission on this topic, served on the commission, and he has, on your behalf, been diligent in tracking what's going on in this area. So we want to thank him for his work there as well. Julie.
Okay. As Larry mentioned, to gain a better understanding of the progress related to safety and security, UW System Administration sent a questionnaire to all the institutions asking them to specifically comment made on the steps they've taken related to each expectation. In the report before you today, we quantified wherever possible the pervasiveness of the campus implementation and tried to give you a sense or a flavor of the types of actions that were taken. As expected, campus priorities and therefore their actions and reactions varied based on such things as campus demographics, their needs, their existing programs, and the campus and community resources. I'd like to highlight just a few of the expectations and the related campus actions. First, UW institutions were expected to develop new or enhance existing safety and security awareness programs. Several institutions indicated that this was an area that they could take some relatively inexpensive steps and make significant progress. For example, parent and student orientation sessions were revised to include more health and safety topics. such as active shooters and sexual assaults. Websites were also updated to include similar information, and many institutions began providing self-defense classes. Other initiatives involving more resources include the development of office protocols for dealing with disruptive individuals, the creation or enhancement of safe walk programs, and the purchase or development of instructional videos, which we'll be seeing more of shortly, which in some campuses were shown online and or as part of a presentation to various groups on campus. UW institutions were also expected to form multidisciplinary review teams to anticipate, identify, and evaluate threats and other safety concerns. All UW campuses have formed such a review team, and the time and resource commitments for these teams can be significant. In many cases, that time and resource commitment has increased, possibly as these teams are publicized more to the campus community, and possibly as the demographics to campus communities change. The report gives one example. At UW Green Bay, the number of cases per year increased from 14 in 2006-2007 to 137 in 2008-2009. As a result, teams on several campuses meet weekly or even more frequently, and at a minimum, the teams meet at least every 2 weeks to discuss individuals of concern and identify potential intervention plans to diffuse the situation. The 2008 report also indicated that work groups would be formed to examine whether and how existing regulations could assist in this area or whether the creation of new ones were needed. In addition to system-wide policies, which are described in this year's report, campus efforts were also made. For example, some campuses reported developing policies regarding the provision of assistance to those in distress, policies regarding the mandated assessment for those exhibiting signs of suicide, and revisions or clarifications to guidelines under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. The 2008 report further established the expectation that UW institutions would continue to make progress towards achieving the appropriate level of services related to counseling and mental health services. This is an area that received a tremendous amount of attention after the Virginia Tech tragedy, both across the nation and within our system. Just one standard, and there are others out there, but one national standard for mental health counseling is one counselor for every 1,500 students. And as I mentioned, that's just one way to gauge the possible level of services that may be needed. 2 institutions within the UW system currently meet that 1 to 1,500 ratio, and all others have taken some steps to increase the availability of their counseling services. This may involve hiring new FTEs, contracting for services, and expanding office hours. Several specific examples are provided on page 4 of your report that's before you today. In addition, UW institutions were expected to have a plan for emergency communication to communicate with the campus community. All institutions reporting having such a plan and periodically testing that plan. Because the reliability of technologies varies and because their availability and usage in the community varies, notifications of potential threats are sent on every campus in multiple ways. And this may include mass emails, reverse 911 technologies, text messages, message boards, public announcement systems, and things like that. Campuses often partner with neighboring communities or counties to share the cost of such notification systems or tap into their existing available technologies. And lastly, I just want to mention that one thing that all the campuses noted is that their procedures in these areas really continue to be refined as they go forward, as they identify new needs, as they conduct tabletop exercises or functional exercises, often in collaboration with local emergency response agencies, as they conduct assessments of these exercises, and as they conduct assessments after various incidents on campus, and as they test their emergency response plans. However, in many cases, the campuses stressed that funding was and continues to be an issue, as has been expressed a few times already today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Petra to discuss UW Oshkosh's experience and the challenges they encounter. Thank you. Technology is not my friend these days, so. We see UW Oshkosh as a caring and concerned community where safety is the foundation. And we also see it as an opportunity for horizontal distinctiveness. We utilize an integrated, comprehensive, team-based approach to make sure that safety is infused in all aspects of our campus.
We have certain outcomes and goals. Some of those short-term, mid-term goals include things like increased knowledge of risky behaviors and the consequences, knowledge of community expectations, and campus resources and how we utilize those and mobilize those, the increased ability to identify risky situations and actually intervene. And overall, our long-term goals are to make sure that UW-Oshkosh is identified as a safe, secure environment where there's an increased sense of community, safety, and responsibility. Julie's covered a number of different initiatives, and I'm going to kind of go through these. What we have done, these are kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of what kinds of things we've put into place on our campus. One is an expanded communication methods and plan, and that includes everything from making sure that safety has its own website, that we have a link to that right on our homepage, periodic emails, posters, those kinds of things. We've expanded the development of campus safety information, including, like I said, that website. We have a number of posters for individuals that are in buildings and the community to see what to do in case of an emergency or a safety situation. We have in each of the rooms of our academic buildings and our residence halls, we have kind of flip charts that kind of go over what different kinds of emergencies could possibly occur and how one can intervene in that. We also implemented a text alert system. We were a little behind the curve on that because, as mentioned before, the technology was a little iffy. One of our sister schools down the road, Ripon, they implemented one, and when they first used it, it crashed. So we wanted to be very deliberate and thoughtful about what kind of product we were going to utilize, and we've implemented our Titan Alert program. We are also looking at ways to better notify campus of emergencies, and we have a product that we have identified, and we're going to implement that program. Our buildings are a little older, and so it's very, very difficult for us to retrofit, and so we're utilizing a product that will provide LED notifications as well as provide loudspeaker information. We also continue to review our campus safety plan to ensure our readiness, and that's done on an ongoing basis. We're constantly trying to develop collaborative relationships with the city and county, and not only just Winnebago County, but also surrounding counties, particularly in the area of law enforcement, mental health providers, hospitals, and service agencies. Our threat assessment team is called SART, which is our Students at Risk Response Team, and that group can also be mobilized to address concerns of faculty and staff, and also non-affiliates to the university. I would like to note that we've had our threat assessment team in place prior to Virginia Tech, and we were listed as best practice by the Governor's Task Force. We also have a unique program, and that is how to help a student in distress, which is a gatekeeper type of training, and we've had over 500 faculty and staff that have gone through that. And we've also, with the students, which is their initiative, developed a Safe Ride program to kind of address the safety issues that take place not on campus, but on the periphery of campus. We also have put into place office safety sessions and have worked with different offices to devise individualized plans. Some of those offices include academic areas like English and foreign language, and some of what we consider higher risk areas such as financial aid, the Chancellor's office, and my office. Expansion of what I call our community service. Always protect your Chancellor. The expansion of community service, that's what a good Vice Chancellor does.
See if I can get your pay raise back.
Get my 2% back? I'm going to be furloughed after this. have what's called our CSO, or Community Service Officers, which are trained students that provide additional security presence, and our Safe Walk, or escort, not the weird escort, but escort program. We previously had 12 CSOs. We have doubled that for next year, and we have 23, and that was done with assistance from our Residence Life program as well as our students. We've also, as part of our growth agenda, added a half-time master's level social worker to work with SAR to manage the caseloads and help coordinate some of the complexities that take place, and work in conjunction with the Counseling Center, Health Center, and Dean of Students Office. We also realigned some additional dollars out of our central pool and reallocated those and hired another police officer. We've also implemented a number of student safety programs with a focus on the first semester and within what we call the UW Oshkosh Safety Model for Programming, which is based on the SAMHSA logic model. Things like the Red Cup virtual house party and Take Back the Night. Campus safety is infused in orientation and the first-year experience, and particularly with parents, we know that the number one influencer for our students is mom, and mom's number one concern is safety. So we're really kind of directing that to the parents as well, both in the recruitment portion and also during the retention aspect of it. We've added a number of different safety phones and blue lights on campus. We have now 102 of those, and many of those are a result of periodic walkthroughs through campus by faculty, staff, and students that's hosted by the Chancellor. That's another Chancellor Safety Walk. We've also implemented Stop the Hate, and which deals with bias incidents, and a new program that we call Step Up, which deals with bystander issues. That's primarily geared towards our students to teach them responsibility for their own safety and also to intervene in risky and unsafe situations with their peers. So that's just a flavor of what we've done, and now I'm going to talk about challenges and opportunities. One is that of technology, and that was mentioned by Julie, and that's ever-changing, and that's also pretty expensive. And so trying to keep up with that and implement the technology that we need in order to be most effective and efficient. Okay. Also making our older buildings safe. Our older buildings, though they're 50, 60 years old, they weren't built to lock down or to address some of the safety issues. So looking at ways that we can manage that facilities. It's a little easier when you build new facilities to incorporate safety. Finding ways to reach out and provide information about safety to the campus community. Our students respond to all different kinds of communications. But none of them respond to just one kind. So we have to make sure that safety is infused in all of that, and also try to engage the faculty and staff in that. Collaborating and developing relationships with off-campus entities, agencies, that's particularly difficult because they're seeing and feeling the same kind of demand and stress that we are seeing. So that provides a challenge for us. Sometimes we can't we have to send our students to Fond du Lac if they have a mental health issue, which is one county over. And we've been trying to engage and do joint kinds of training with mental health providers to help solve that. Training is another challenge and opportunity. There is a certain amount of expense that comes with that, and particularly my concern is the time away from campus, and many of these really great training programs are out of state. So, and we need to make sure that training is put into place because there's new safety risks. I'm always amazed as to how things change and what kinds of things will come up that I never thought I would ever see, and I think I've seen it all. So we need to make sure that we understand those best practice protocols in responding and training. One of my concerns is that of staffing. As we spend more and more time dealing with individuals in distress, faculty and staff and students, and dealing with campus emergencies and safety, it takes away from the day-to-day duties. For many of our staff, it becomes all-consuming and draining. We've had to reallocate some of the duties in our Dean of Students office, and so I have a couple of staff members that all they deal with is emergencies and discipline. There's a tendency for burnout. Staffing with the demand from students, parents, and the campus community, and even the community itself to provide more safety-related programs. We, and I mean we as collective, the whole UW system, and my colleagues, need additional staff members, whether it's police officers, counselors, case managers, Dean of Student staff, victims advocates, and risk managers. And I feel guilty as I say that, especially after the first presentation. And another challenge is to make the tools that are needed in order to make our campus safer, and for our staff that work in the area of safety, that kind of equipment, we need to make sure that we pool our resources and deal with the cost and availability of some of those resources. And once again, a good Catholic guilt is coming up. Funding, with budget cuts, and already our students are really concerned about their cost of their education. You know, where will that funding come from, and how can we spare some of these areas, the impending cuts that will be coming? I know that we've done a lot of creative things through realignment and reallocation, but these are very challenging times. And most importantly, putting the staffing and the funding aside, is how do we develop an understanding and a campus culture where a safe environment is everybody's responsibility, and that it begins with the individual itself and in a caring, concerned campus community. And I will turn this over to Sue.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I guess it is now. Thanks for having me, and I want to thank you for the forward momentum that you continue to lend to this project. Having us come once a year and actually have to physically stand up in front of you, it's a major incentive, so I want to thank you for allowing that to continue. I just want to touch upon about 4 things in the report very quickly, and then I'd like to show you a video that we've developed. Like all of the campuses, we have multi-discipline review teams. The challenge to our team this past year has been how we deal with outsiders, not staff, faculty, and students. We have enough challenges with those. They always keep it interesting. But the outside element has become more and more problematic. I'll give you just one example. We've had 74 police contacts with one particular individual in a given year. It's resulted in over 20 arrests of this person. Because of the court system and our struggle downtown a bit, is that most district attorneys, rightly so because of their workload, will lump these things together. So we might arrest a person, say, 4 or 5 times before they get to court on the first issue, and the district attorney will put them together and do kind of a negotiation and hold them accountable for one, dismiss the other 4. Unfortunately, the type of individual that we're dealing with, they see that as they were right 4 times and we were right once, which only emboldens them to come back again and again and again. And we have several individuals that fall into this category, but our most notorious is 74 contacts. Moving right along to keep this fast and interesting. Radio interoperability. Dane County is about to embark on a over $30 million project to redo the radio structure within the entire county, and we'll be a part of that when it happens. Depending on the selection of the system, the wide range of cost is somewhere between $16,000, which is mere pocket change in the relative scheme of radio interoperability, to $1.7 million that it will cost UW-Madison to convert to that system. We're somewhere in that range. Obviously, depending on where that comes out, we'll apply for federal grants or come up with other creative financing of how we can phase that in over time. I'm not really terribly worried about that because we've always been able to stay in touch with at least the city of Madison and the village of Shorewood Hills. the town of Madison, that really are the ones that immediately surround us. So as we go forward, we're going to keep interoperability alive for UW-Madison regardless of how we have to go about doing it. Under emergency communications, one of the things, Petra talked about this, so I won't spend time on the technology, but I do want to talk a little bit about and get you to reflect upon the ever-increasing expectations that the public seems to have of emergency communication. And at some point, I think we have to reintroduce some common sense to this. For instance, I am notorious now for my famous quote, that red and blue lights are not an invitation. And we say that to our students, that if you see red and blue lights of police vehicles and fire engines, it's best to go the other way. It is not best to go and try to figure out what's going on. And if you're in a room and an emergency erupts, or in a room next door to where an emergency erupts, don't wait for me to text message you to confirm that what you're hearing is gunshots. Because there's a really, famous quote, there's a really unrealistic expectation right now that if something happens at UW-Madison, somewhere at UW-Madison, that we will be able to get a call to alerting us to the problem, confirm that it's actually a problem and not just somebody calling in a false report, which happens. Being able to get onto an emergency communication system, which is pretty quick in our business, figuring out exactly what to say that would be meaningful and not just alarming, and give you some level of instruction to follow that would make sense. And then we push into these systems, text messaging, we have over 15,000 users on our system, or email, which we have over 66,000 emails that we can produce, and that goes out with a click. It's true, it does. But then it enters these other systems. The text messaging system takes over 25 minutes to deliver 15,000 text messages. The email system takes anywhere from 18 to 22 minutes to deliver 66,000 texts or emails. Your natural instincts have better clicked in long before. Okay, enough said. The University Response Plan. Our University Response Plan has been exercised 13 times since 2002, which is roughly about twice a year. And we've actually used our emergency response plan 17 times in that same period for real emergencies, because we don't really just wait for practice. Last November, we did a full-scale, fully functional exercise of an active shooter, and we had students that actually were theater students, and they were completely made up as to the injuries. So there was the blood, and there was all of that wonderful stuff. And we had real EMTs responding and having to triage their injuries. We had police officers respond. And then we activated our university crisis plan as if we would in an active shooter. And we had everyone form up at the Emergency Operations Center. And then we took it in real time. In real time, as the officers were able to make their way through the building in real time and find the casualties in real time and identify those people in real time. And then we had Chancellor Martin actually conduct 2 different press conferences in real time with people posing as reporters, with it being recorded, so that we could go through how we would lay out press conferences under those conditions and so forth. And so that continues to stay. Our last exercise was May 20th. Our next exercise will be June 25th. Any of you are welcome to attend any of these to see how they work. If you have that curiosity, we'd be more than happy. As part of all of this, we have established quite a robust training program that we have shared with all of the campuses throughout the UW system who want it. And in many cases, we've shared it with other campuses throughout the country. And now, actually, we've done that internationally. And one of the components, just a small component, a 6-minute component of a very long training session, is this video that I'm going to show you. And the reason why I want to put it in that context is, if you just see this video cold, without the context, you, I think, would feel very uncomfortable and very uneasy. So I want you to understand that we don't just put this video up and let people watch this video without any context. We do not have this video on our web site, and we would not put this video on our website for that very reason. But this video now has made its way to almost all 50 states and at least 3 other countries that we know of. And we think that it keeps the students' attention. It's only 6 minutes long, and I'd ask now for some technical help to get it to play. If it doesn't work, blame him. Shots coming from the building next door. Or if you were in a classroom and someone came in and began to fire. While we've never had a situation like this occur on campus, if one were to occur, we need you to be prepared to act, and act quickly. We feel that if you have thought about this just one time in advance, you'll increase your chances of survival. What actions would you take? Where would you go? What would you do? How would you work through the fear?
If you remember one word from this video, remember out, get out, call out, hide out, keep up, take out. Your best option, if possible, is to get out, leave the room, run in the opposite direction. If you're on a lower level, climb out a window. Get yourself and others out of the immediate area and to a place of safety. Put as much distance as you can between yourself and the shooter. Once you've made it to a place of relative safety, call 911. If you don't have a cell phone, use an office phone, cane phone, or campus emergency phone. But only do so once you're safe. Run, hide, barricade first, then call 911.
University Police 911, what's the address of your emergency?
I saw a man with a gun. I'm at Ranger Hall.
Be prepared to give the operator your exact location and as many details of the situation as you can. The number of shooters, their descriptions, the direction in which they are headed.
I only saw one. He was running towards Baskin Hill.
Dispatch to squads 3, 4, and 2.
Don't assume someone else has already called 911. The more calls the police receive, the better picture they will have of the overall situation. And you may be able to provide details no one else has yet mentioned. Even if you only heard gunshots and never actually saw anyone, your call may still help the police follow the shooter's movements.
I'll be right here.
Once you've placed the call to 911, don't call anyone else. The 911 operator may want to call you back. If you can't get out, hide out.
Were those gunshots?
Crawl under a desk, duck into a closet, hide behind a door. If a room appears empty, there's a better chance the shooter will simply pass it by. If you're still hiding when the police arrive, realize they don't know who you are. A shooter might just as easily pose as a hiding victim. And until the actual assailant has been captured or killed, the police need to treat everyone they come across as a potential threat. Identify yourself and then follow their instructions.
Here, hide out, lock the door.
If at all possible, don't let the shooter enter the room. Lock and barricade the door. Lock the windows. Use a desk, table, chair, whatever is available to prevent the shooter from entering. Something as simple as a doorstop or even a notebook can be used to jam the door shut. Anything you can do to keep a barrier between you and the shooter will shield you and delay the shooter's progress, making it more likely that help will arrive anytime. If the shooter has already entered your immediate vicinity and there's no way to take out It may be enough to distract a shooter long enough for you or others to make a move. Remember, at this point, you may literally be fighting for your life.
No one ever wants to be involved in a shooting. But in today's society, these incidents are becoming a fact of life and death on and off campus. If you just take a few moments ahead of time and think through how you would act, you will increase your chances of surviving.
So remember the 5 O's. If at all possible, get out of the immediate area to a place of safety. Once you're safe, call 911. If you can't get out, find a place to hide and stay there until help arrives. When it does, follow police instructions. If you can, lock and barricade the door. Then come up with a plan for what to do if the shooter manages to break in. And finally, if there's no other option, take the shooter out, using whatever means necessary.
All of these steps represent taking action. And taking action increases your chances of survival. In an active shooter situation, you've got to commit to taking action, working through your fear. And in that way, you'll be one step closer to getting yourself out of danger.
I'd like to just finish up by talking about some of the system-wide expectations and some of the initiatives that we have taken to address those. There are 3 primary areas that were identified for system-wide expectations and initiatives. The first was communication and coordination across the system. The idea here was to utilize the expertise from around the system to figure out how best to address issues of prevention, intervention, and aftermath response, and then to share ideas and best practices with one another for the benefit of everybody. To help organize this, the report called for the formation of the President's Advisory Committee on Health, Safety, and Security. This is a group of system and campus representatives from academic affairs, student affairs, campus police, risk management, health services, legal, human resources, government relations and communication, and operations review and audit. The advisory committee is charged with identifying potential and existing health, safety, and security risks, gathering and sharing information about these risks, forming ad hoc committees to study these risk areas in greater detail as necessary, and recommending system-wide policies, practices, procedures, and guidelines when appropriate. Currently, for example, the group, as you know, has formed and charged an ad hoc committee to report on issues of mental health, and you'll be hearing about that report next fall. Additionally, another group has been put together called the Campus Safety Coordinators, and they've been formed to help our communications around the system on these very important issues. And this group consists of individuals from each campus selected by the Chancellor to act as a campus contact person, point of contact with regard to matters of campus safety and security. As an example, we regularly share with these individuals information about system-wide, statewide, or national training opportunities and funding sources. The second system-wide initiative is around the important area of training. A system-wide approach to training is clearly more efficient and cost-effective than having each campus develop its own training program. And thanks to the leadership of the advisory committee, the chief student affairs officers from around the system, and the UW-Madison police folks, we have been able to host 3 system-wide training sessions on various topics related to threat assessment for members of our campus threat assessment teams, and a 4th session is being planned for December. each of those sessions have had over 100 participants attend. In addition, there have been a number of local and regional sessions specifically designed for UW police personnel on advanced threat assessment and on how to make students, faculty, and staff more aware of these issues in an effort to prevent or better respond to violent incidents. And this video is a great example of how this can be done. And the advisory committee recently conducted a system-wide survey to determine what other areas of training we should be focusing on in the future. And the third area of system-wide attention has been around funding and resources, something that you've heard a lot about today. The system has supported various training sessions that I described earlier. The system has also contracted with the UW-Madison folks to provide continuity of operation or COOP planning and maintenance services for all UW institutions. The system has also agreed to provide funding support for campuses to achieve basic radio interoperability capabilities. And I would add that we are continuing to pursue state, federal, and other forms of external funding opportunities. For example, we are looking at the federal stimulus money to see if there are areas that might relate to campus safety and security initiatives. In truth, however, as you've heard, most of the funding for meeting these expectations in this report have come from campus reallocations, seg fees, and in some cases even differential tuition. So I guess to conclude, it's our sense from this review that our campuses and the system as a whole have made good progress over the year in addressing these expectations and thereby enhancing campus safety and security preparedness. So that is our update, and we're happy to address any questions or comments that you have.
Thank you very much, Larry. Questions for Larry or any of his co-presenters? Yes, Regent Conley-Kiesler.
And for Petra, do you know what the financial impact has been on the campus since you've implemented more since the report? You know, is that, because I know when we looked at the budgets, it was several $1 million if we were going to start implementing some of the suggestions. And some of what you've done is really coordinating in the community and that staff time, but not necessarily a hard cost.
We've also been very lucky with some external funding, and we've received two $250,000 grants over the last 5 years for mental health, or SAMHSA grants that deals with the Stop the Hate, the Step It Up, gatekeeper training, those kinds of things. And it also allows us to fund additional mental health providers. So I think we're one of the institutions listed as we're probably where we need to be staff-wise, but that's thanks to the grants. I don't think we've actually sat down and figured out the actual cost with everything, both with the police side of it, the facility side of it, the notification side of it, and because it comes from so many different pots of dollars, everything from seg fees, differential tuition, grants, reallocation of internal kinds of dollars, realignment and structuring of positions. There are certain tasks that we don't do anymore because now they're focused on the safety aspect of it. But I think that's maybe something that we need to do with campuses to find out what the cost is and how we've reallocated those dollars, so we can give you a number. Yeah.
Because, you know, we always talk about access and affordability. In my mind, it's access, affordability, and safety. Because if people aren't feeling safe on campuses, or if there's a crisis, people aren't going to want to come. Access will be an issue for us. So.
Right. That's why you have to have that distinctiveness. It has to be part of that campus culture.
Just one other question I'm curious about. When there's an incident on the campuses, are the families notified? Is there an email that goes out to parents? I'm just thinking of suicide, or we've had a few accidental deaths or things that have happened. Does anybody do that?
We do. We do something similar, and I think there are a variety of options to get that information out to the community. We have a parent listserv that, and also our Titan Alert allows parents to sign up for that, so parents can get text messages about emergencies that take place on campus. And we also do
a pretty good job of making sure that if there is something like that, that it's on our front of our website. So, and in certain situations where we can identify specific parents or family members, then we'll make those particular phone calls.
Well, and I have to say, as a parent of a first-year college student at Butler, I can't even tell you how many emails I received from either the police there or from the president there when there were incidences that were happening. Suicide, there was suicide in my daughter's dorm, and there were incidents that happened out, it wasn't even on campus, but it was in the perimeter of the campus, so they would send us updates and emails all the time, which was really a great thing, being a mom with a worry gene. And and maybe having worked in violence and violence prevention for 18 years, I'm a little bit more nervous about it than maybe some other people would be, because I've seen the aftermath of what happens in those violent situations. So if campuses don't do that, I know as a parent I really appreciated being contacted throughout this last year by Butler.
Regent Bartel.
Thank you. Kevin, as the Regent representative on the President's Commission on Campus Safety, I want to say that you recall that last year we had the report, and one of the things that I mentioned at the time, that in order for this report to be successfully implemented, we're going to have to take it up periodically, and this is the first time that we've done that. I think most of you will agree, having seen what we've been presented, that this is a tremendously successful initiative. It's becoming a tremendously successful initiative. And I want to compliment, first of all, Don Mash, who was here. Don, you recall, led the initiative originally, and he came back to hear the presentation. Larry Rubin and the system people who have worked on it, particularly Chief Reisling, who not only chaired the commission but has lent Madison resources and knowledge to the effort throughout. Petra and representatives of the other campuses who have been working very diligently on this project all over the state. This isn't a report that just sat on the shelf. It is one that has been worked on and implemented throughout the system, and there are still lots of challenges, as we've been told, but I think we're moving forward, and I want to compliment everyone who's been involved in this throughout the system.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Regent Loftus.
Just a quick question for the Chief. What was the discussion or the process when it became even likely that during the ongoing flu outbreak that you might have to protect the health of other students by quarantining some students? Does this fit into this structure at all, or is that something that you, as I recall the public health statutes, there's a lot of power there, but not for you. What were your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Actually, we did activate the university responsible into the pandemic. We initially activated it physically, where we activated an emergency operations center, got everyone in a room, made sure everybody was up to speed on what was happening, where the virus was coming out of Mexico and how it was affecting the United States at that point. And then what we did was we continued it virtually. And the reason we continued it virtually was because of the idea that we would go to social distancing at some point, which never actually occurred because the flu was stopped before it got to that level. But we figured bringing everyone together and putting them in a room like this and trying to get them to operate under emergency conditions, we would just be spreading the flu. So we did it all virtually. And it was the first time we tested our emergency operations system virtually, and it had some interesting startup issues, but it actually worked quite well. So this structure does lend itself to emergencies with scenes like tornadoes, emergencies of public health. We've even activated the university response plan in a very small segment of it, because it can be partially activated when our band erupted last fall. So we use it for a series of things. Talk about true bona fide emergencies when the trumpet section gets out of hand. Got to have an answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of us thought it was the tuba section that was Regent Vasquez.
I was thinking more of the tubas myself, but Chief, the point that you made about the text message and emails and the minutes, I wasn't quite clear what caused the delay. Is it the technology? Is it the preparation of the messages? Is it what exactly? And is that something that's also happening in a comparable way at other campuses, that these messages, because the impression is that somehow all of this technology is exactly as you said, instantaneous. So I was rather surprised to hear that it isn't as instantaneous as I think the general public may believe. So is it the technology, or what is it?
Well, actually preparing the message in and getting it formatted probably takes less than 3 minutes. So getting it together, once you know that you've really got something you have to send, probably takes us less than 3 minutes. Once I say literally the button is hit, the send button for an email, it goes into the massive servers over at the Division of Information Technology, DOIT, at the UW-Madison campus. And that then sends to the entire list that is active, which is updated by DOIT literally every day. And right now we're at about 66,000 email users off of the main server. Depending on what other traffic is moving at that time, whatever everyone else might be doing on the internet, on UW-Madison, on my web space, on all those things, it takes time to literally churn through and send out to 66,000 addresses that email. Now, depending on where you are on the email list, you may have yours in 2 minutes. I may get mine at 10 minutes. Somebody else may get theirs at 20 minutes. Depending on the time of day, they might get it at 30 minutes. It does just take time before it hits and gets to your mailbox. Text messaging is different because we're doing all the cell providers. And different cell providers can move those messages quicker. I don't know if any of you signed up for the New York Time alerts or the Channel 3000 alerts. It's the same principle. When they send it out, because it is mass sent, the first thing those cell carriers want to know is this spam? Or have you said yes to it? And so they put you through a process, a screening filtration process. And then it depends on how many other text messages are moving at that moment for how quickly those things are going to flow to your phone. You may be close to the tower, and it may get there quickly. Other people may be in the Bahamas, but they're going to get the alert in the Bahamas because they signed up for UW's and Madison alerts. So it is the technology and it is the filtration processes. It's not TV. It really does take a matter of time. That's why I think we have to drop back and say we have to use common sense, because we're never going to beat CNN, and we're just never going to do it, and we're not going to be able to stay up with the events on the ground.
I was just curious, thank you for that. I was just curious whether the software could have an embedded code that would allow instances like this that says this is an emergency message, that whatever else is in the system has got to be set aside and let this one through. Is the software development possibly at that stage, or could become, where just like when you see a siren coming through, that means that there's a difference between that vehicle and another police vehicle coming by? It says you better move over to the side.
Well, and my sense is that already exists, and this is as fast as it gets today.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none. With that, Sue, thanks very much. Larry, Julie, and Petra, thanks. This is important, as Jeff said, that we keep paying attention to it and bringing it back to you so that you know what we're doing on it, and we'll make a commitment to do that. I want to thank those presenters very much and turn it back to President Bradley.
Good. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. We'll now, if I can have a motion to adjourn, we will have lunch and then go into our committee meetings. Second, moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? We're adjourned.